Are you a leader? Yes or no? What a question. What's your instinctive response? But perhaps, maybe more interestingly, what are your beliefs about leadership that inform that response? My name is Rich Watkins from Let's Go, and I want to propose 2 ways of thinking about what a leader is that are pretty common, but pretty unhelpful, and 1 way of thinking about leadership that is less common, but much, much more helpful. The first is where we see leadership as an elevated position. This is leadership as a status that you achieve. So you're going about your normal life and you're not a leader, and then at some point someone appoints you or anoints you to an elevated position of leader. Your leadership status is confirmed. This is a similar way to if you won an Oscar or got knighted. You see, it's now public knowledge that you have this position. And in this view, there are, of course, a limited number of these positions. So if you want one, you've got to be better than those around you who also want one. Without an elevated position, you can't lead, so leadership is inherently competitive. But also elevation is relative, so in any room you are or you aren't a leader depending on who else is around and how elevated they are. So you need to pay close, maybe almost constant attention to where you are in the pecking order to know if you're a leader or not, since you're only a leader if you're in charge. Now, if you are in charge, the good news is you don't need to do anything in particular or behave in any particular way to be a leader, because leadership is nothing more than an elevated position. This is actually a pretty common way of thinking about what leadership is. And I'm suggesting it's not helpful. It encourages leaders who are bureaucratic, political and status driven, without particularly shaping helpful leadership behaviours. The second way of seeing is leadership as identity. This is where leadership is something you identify as. You have an internal felt sense of being a leader. And this is also something that others identify in you. It's a recognisable trait, you know, like Ali's a real leader, or I just don't see Joe as a leader. In this way of thinking, being a leader is a bit like being an adult or an artist. You have to believe you are one, and other people have to agree. And in this way of thinking, it's clear when someone definitely is, but it is hard to articulate how you would get there if you're not. And it leaves a lot of grey area about exactly who is and who isn't a leader, which can lead to a lot of self-doubt, you know, a lot of questions. Am I really a leader? It does see leadership as more than just elevated status, which is good, but it has its own problems. You see, leadership as identity relies quite heavily on some kind of shared prototype of what a leader looks like. But do all leaders look the same? And are the leaders of yesterday a perfect expression of what we need in leaders tomorrow? Anyone who doesn't fit the mould could easily be written off prematurely or write themselves off. And this could get us predictable and banal leaders who really are just following a leadership script. Now, rather than what we actually need, which is the exciting diversity, wide representation that can enrich our world, where leaders are free to improvise and innovate beyond the mould. As well as giving safe leadership as identity actively incentivizes overconfidence. This is fake it till you make it. But wouldn't we rather have leaders with a bit more humility and sensitivity and a bit less bluster and entitlement? So, are you a leader? Leadership as elevated position or leadership as identity both assume that this is a yes or no question that can be answered absolutely. And they both make leadership all about you, not about what you're doing or how you're influencing those around you. It's uncollaborative leadership at a time when the world is crying out for the opposite. So what's the alternative? I want to suggest that leadership is better thought of not as an elevated position or an identity, but as an orientation, a stance that we can all take to any situation we find ourselves in, whatever our position and whether or not we feel ready to declare ourselves as leaders. It's taking responsibility as an active, collaborative participant in your arena, using your influence, whatever that is, to bring about something you care about. That's leadership. You see, it's not exclusive. We want to find our teams brimming with leadership, and it's not binary. We can all take little leadership steps or grasp hold of leadership moments without an identity transplant or a promotion ceremony. When we see leadership as an orientation, it means encouraging leadership in those all around us. Because we're not clamoring for a limited number of spots called leader or anxious about our identity. We're attempting to contribute, and that is going to take everyone's leadership. Leadership as an orientation actually includes the healthy aspects of the other two in a way. You see, but it works slightly differently. In any given situation, you need to actively orientate yourself towards leadership, right? And as you practice this orientation, it's like a muscle that you exercise, and it becomes habit. And as it becomes more of a habit, you actually feel more like a leader, and also people start to recognize you as such. So it does become part of your identity. And in a healthy culture, this will lead us into positions where we're given more authority. But you see, the position of authority and the identity aren't the leadership. The leadership is the continual orientation back around the work, around using our influence positively in the situations we find ourselves in. You see, the word leadership actually has roots in the Old English leiden, to guide or to bring forth. And its close Indo-European Germanic relative, leidjan, to travel. So leadership really is this ongoing orientation to bringing forth good things and the willingness to travel the road towards the things we care about. This video comes with a nod to a new tool, the Let's Go Leadership Pack, which we've just launched. It's a self-coaching tool for orientating yourself towards leadership. It will help you expand your leadership imagination, think a bit bigger and a bit more sharply about how you can lead in the situation you find yourself in. And it asks you kind of 3 questions. How do I systematically build impact? How do I bring the right presence? And how do I respond positively to challenges? You can find much more about the Leadership Pack at letsgo.so/leadership pack.